the 76ers still don't have a coach. And now this from Keith Smith, who will be on with us tonight at 5 o'clock, says he's starting to hear a lot of buzz that the Sixers are letting teams know they're open to trade talks if they hire Mike D'Antoni. What kind of thing? If we hire this guy, we'd be willing to trade guys. If they hire Mike D'Antoni to be their next head coach, Philadelphia realizes that the current roster with all the bigs isn't built to be successful on a D'Antoni team. I got an idea. Then how about hiring someone else? So I guess let's bring Jason Fitz from Spain and Fitz and ask him that question. If you're breaking them up for Mike D'Antoni, who stays, who goes? Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid for Mike D'Antoni?
Guys, that's a real – I mean, you have stumped me with that question. I did not see that coming. And I don't know, do you break up two great players for Mike D'Antoni? Like, I just can't – I can't wrap my head around why you would split them up. I understand process, you know, and no pun intended. I can't understand why they would split them up, frankly. I would still try and keep both of them. I mean, I don't – as much as the 76ers are going to look around and try and figure out how to drastically get better overnight, there has to be some concept around the toughest thing to do is get star players. And in definition of most, you got two of them.
Yeah, you said something that's interesting. Is hiring Mike D'Antoni worth it to break those guys up? Like, are you getting this great coach that is going to turn your franchise around?
That's the thing to me. Like, no, I don't. Absolutely not. I mean, it's not that Mike D'Antoni can't be very good. I understand that, but Mike D'Antoni's had absolutely epic players, and the knock on him is it just hasn't been able to take that next step. So we suddenly think that a change in scenery is going to be the big thing there. And guys, you know, I had our smart people at Stats and Info yesterday for ESPN really breaking down into coaches to change after long 10 years of success. You know, how do they do if they've been relatively good, you know, 4 years in a row plus, and then they go to their next spot? And what we find historically is that their win percentage is about the same, and their depth in the playoffs is about the same. Budenholzer being the exception. Obviously, he took a step forward, but that's not the norm. So even when we were looking yesterday, you know, with Spain and Fitz, and we were taking a look at the Bulls' decisions with Billy Donovan, you got to look at it and say, what are you expecting with the coach? I would not give up two star players for any coach right now that's coming in, because coaches are in their very essence replaceable in the NBA culture. Players are not. So you got two stars. Find a coach that's willing to make it work.
Because I was questioning. Now, I don't know to what level the Sixers brought in Donovan, but if you look at the roster of the Bulls and look at the roster of the 76ers and Billy Donovan chose the Bulls, does that say something about Philadelphia?
Oh, well, that to me was the most stunning part. You know, we talked to Will Perdue last night on the show, and obviously he knows the Bulls better than most and still works down there as part of the broadcast work for it. And I asked him that straight-up question. If you're Billy Donovan, why did you want the Bulls? And he said, never thought of it, don't really have an answer. And the more I keep looking at it, I understand that there's this concept that the Bulls are essentially restarting, and so it's a front office conversation. It's an ownership conversation. Do you believe in those pieces that Chicago's put in place? There is zero reason that I would take the Chicago job over the Philly job if I'm a coach. I mean, zero. So I don't understand what Donovan wasn't seeing that he'd be looking for in Chicago, but certainly Philly is a better job.
Jason Fitz, Spain and Fitz, 7 to 9, 97.3 ESPN. Jay, you know, let's transition over to the Eagles right now, where Carson Wentz is getting hammered all over the place. And of course, it didn't help that they drafted a quarterback, so people are wondering, is this the end of the road for Carson Wentz after now 2 straight bad weeks? I mean, do the Eagles organization have to start wondering whether or not it's time to move on from their former number 2 overall pick?
No. I mean, there just isn't. And I know everybody wants to be, you know, really hyped up about Jalen Hurts and sort of make it make sense that he was such a high draft pick for them. But realistically, if the Eagles thought that they were drafting the replacement at any point for Carson Wentz, they wouldn't have waited until the second round. If you think you've got the next Carson Wentz, you're drafting that guy in the first round. Every single team in the NFL. So I think we're trying to sort of put pieces to a puzzle. It's sort of like all the people that are huge fans of like how Nostradamus could sort of predict everything, but it never actually predicts. It's always afterwards when we try and put these pieces together and say, oh, no, this is what he really meant. Like, I think that's what we're doing with the Eagles right now. I still believe that Carson Wentz is capable of winning a ton of football games in the NFL. So I think it's too overreactionary to take a couple of bad games and say that's the end of the road. I excused week 1. I will say that because I really expected the Washington football team to have a great defensive line. And I was filling in that morning on radio on Sunday morning, just filling in with my buddy Peter Burns. And he asked me what unit we weren't talking enough about in the NFL. And I said the Washington defensive line, and he made fun of me the whole show. So he called me afterwards and said, my bad, when we looked at the Eagles game week 1. So I could excuse the week 1 sort of the defensive line got after him. Week 2 is a little tougher to me to excuse. But I'm telling you right now, if anyone thinks that there wouldn't be a massive drop-off between Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts, they are just kidding themselves. Jalen Hurts is not as good as Carson Wentz.
Well, I want to ask you this then, because obviously this team won a Super Bowl. He was not the quarterback. Doug Peterson was the coach, and it just feels like something's off here. I mean, everything just the number 1 pick today, Rieger, he gets hurt. He's out for multiple weeks. They've had so many injuries over the year, but it just feels like, something is just not kosher between the coach and the quarterback, or something's up with that organization that just doesn't feel right for a team that just recently won a Super Bowl for the first time in its, history.
No, and you are 1,000% right about that. I mean, if I'm the Eagles, a couple of things. One, we got to remember that, obviously no preseason means things are going to be rough for certain teams. It shouldn't have been rough for this one. They have continuity. So I don't think that's a valid excuse there. But I do think that there's a little bit of sort of warm-up time. And you're right, Carson Wentz, to me, when I watch both of those games back afterwards, doesn't look comfortable, which is weird to say for somebody that's been in the offense so long. If I'm Doug Peterson and the Eagles, I go back and I sit down with Carson and say, okay, give me the 20 plays that this week you've got. Let's get you comfortable and get your feet underneath him. He needs to get on a roll, no different than sort of when a shooter starts the season cold in the NBA. Like, there's got to be something that gets them going. Carson Wentz needs that something. So, really, frankly, again, and we're talking all coaching today. I get that. But I look at Doug Peterson and say, okay, you are a brilliant, brilliant man that knows how to coach offense at the highest possible level. Find a way to make your quarterback comfortable. And that's the teams that we are seeing early on that are having success offensively, I think partially are having that because coaches are doing what's right in the wheelhouse for a quarterback. That doesn't feel like it's happening, frankly, for Philadelphia and for Minnesota. And I think that's those two teams are the two most disappointing early in the season.
Before we touch on your Raiders, which I'm sure you're dying to get into, if I asked you how confident are you that the Eagles can win on Sunday against the Cincinnati Bengals, because around here there's a little bit of doubt. Believe it or not, there is. How confident are you?
If I could only make one pick this week, it would be on the list of the short games that I'm that confident in it. And believe me, let me say this loudly. I think Joe Burrow is going to be a superstar player in the NFL. I loved watching him last year at LSU. It was stunning to see him, and we were lucky enough to see him up close and in person 3 or 4 times throughout the course of the year. I think Joe Burrow is a star, and they have some great offensive weapons, but they have an absolute hot garbage dumpster fire of an offensive line. I don't think that their defense holds up as well. So I think Philly gets right, and they get right in a big way on Sunday.
All right, Jason Fitz, Spain and Fitz tonight. Here more on NFL week number 3, which starts tomorrow night. And, of course, the NBA playoffs continue. Nuggets with a nice win. Now, they should have won that game, too, they could argue. Do we feel like this is going to be another long series?
Yeah, and I'm just never going to bet against the Nuggets anymore because I'm wrong every time. And I think it's hysterical that every time, we have the 3-1 deficit. So we give you the historical context of that. And then we saw all the stats coming out yesterday about LeBron undefeated when his teams go up 2-0 and all of these different things they're trying to tell you. And it's like, guys, that does not matter with this team. You're absolutely right. They should have won game 2. I think that sits in their craw. But I also don't think they care. Whatever that DNA is that makes people feel like their back's against the wall, the Nuggets don't have it. They're just coming out playing loose, and they're playing fast, and they're playing the way they know how to play. And they have a total ease with it. So, I'm done picking against them. I think the Lakers are the better team in the series. I think the Lakers will win this series. But I think any sort of concept that the Nuggets aren't going to make it a long one just isn't giving enough credit to how well they've played throughout the course of it. So nothing will shock me anymore with Denver. And I think it's one of the best stories we've seen in the bubble. It's really fun.
All right, and then Heat Celtics tonight. We'll have that for you on 97.3 ESPN. The NBA playoffs, the NFL, a lot to dive into tonight. Spain and Fitz, and of course, Jason Fitz, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, Fitz.
Thanks. Appreciate it, guys. Have a great week.